brought to light a terrible injustice, and we're going to put it right.
Effective immediately, every release will be an Ultramarines release. Mark from Calth News, please.
And as you can see, if we turn the criticism into a joke, everyone will laugh and we can avoid addressing it entirely. Welcome, grimdark enjoyers. For this one, I have a point of discussion, a state of affairs in Warhammer 40k I would like to lay out. This was spurred on by a recent hobby project. You see, I happen to have 5 Chaos Space Marines kicking around in the pile of shame. And I just happen to have 4 Chaos Plasma Guns and a Combi Plasma as well. Naturally, my brain went to, why not create a 5-man plasma team? A special weapons squad, if you will. Now, I knew before setting out that such a loadout would be illegal, due to the fact that the rules are bad. But as a hobby-first guy, I went ahead with it. Rule of cool and all that. And here they are. I'm quite happy with them. I was aiming for a thematic Word-Bearers special weapon team, something evocative of their Warp Fire plasma. And I'd say it hits the mark. But you know, I felt like this sort of unit is fairly evocative of the special weapon support squads from Horus Heresy, which is kind of neat. And then the gears began to turn. I began to have a kind of sinking feeling, a creeping dread. Which brings us to the claim of this video. Loyalist Space Marines better exemplify the Veterans of the Long War theme than Chaos Space Marines. The reasoning is pretty straightforward. In the 30k era, tactical support squads are ubiquitous. I mean, it makes sense, right? If you have an armory of war gear, it doesn't take a Primarch level intellect to decide to leverage those specialized tools across squads for specific circumstances. And it wasn't all that long ago us 40k players had such freedom as well. Look no earlier than 8th edition, back when Space Marines still had the unit option for their company veterans, and before Chaos Space Marines Chosen received their new kit. Here we can see 2 unit datasheets that allowed either flavor of Space Marines to effectively have their special weapon squads. But fast forwarding to current era 40k, here we are. I find it fascinating in a morbid sort of way. How did we get here? Well, actually, we know how. The more interesting question is why. But fret not, I won't leave you hanging. The answer, grimdark enjoyers, is because of the new 40k rules based on product order. What I'm referring to is GW's rules design preference to ground game mechanics and rules based on products in our world rather than the reality of the setting, which in this case relates to war gear options, much to my chagrin. Now, this isn't breaking news. GW has been slowly pulling war gear options away since 8th edition at the very least, but it does delineate a mark in the sand, as this is the state of new 40k. Chosen, the elite warriors don't have their pick of the armory. In fact, while every Chosen technically has a war gear option available, those options are more restricted compared to what's available to even standard legionaries.
It's ironic.
The thematic dissonance here is deafening, and it only gets worse when we look at the Loyalist side of the equation. We all know Loyalist Space Marines receive a disproportionate amount of attention. This past year is an excellent case in point. But interestingly, over the course of New 40k, GW has pulled the levers within the rules, removing the flexible special weapon platform of the company veteran squads to create more products for each option. And now, because of New 40k's rules based on product order, we find ourselves in a rather insipid landscape. In the past, I've made the point that GW can't help themselves in making the Loyalists bigger and more imposing. This is a bafflingly stupid design choice on the modeling side, as it should be obvious that your heroes will be more heroic if they stand against larger, more imposing foes. But now on top of that terrible modeling choice, we have this issue on the game mechanics side. The Loyalists are better representatives of Heresy-era Astartes than the Chaos Space Marines, when that was their whole shtick. A massive part of the contrast between 40k Loyalist and Traitor Marines is that the Loyalists are characterized as younger cousins. I'll put it like this. One of these factions had their legions broken down into chapters. The faction which remained whole refers to themselves as veterans of the Long War, referring to the Horus Heresy. And yet now, the faction which did break apart their legions into chapters, and doesn't refer to themselves as veterans of the Long War, is the one that has the means to effectively leverage Heresy-style tactical support squads. So now, Chaos Space Marines' defining trait is being ill-equipped, chaos-warped versions of their former selves, while the Loyalists are moving closer to that Heresy-style formation. A complete role reversal between how the two factions ought to be characterized. Now with that all laid out, I'd like to talk about spin. Narrative spin, referring to how we can reach and bend over to justify the design choices so they can optically sit well within the narrative. For GW's rules based on product order, their spin is such. On the Loyalist side, Guilliman wakes up and initiates a crusade, and because Belisarius Cawl is such a fan of the Heresy, he introduces Heresy-style unit formations back to the Loyalists. Mind you, he doesn't roll out a special weapons team with war gear options, like in the Heresy. Instead, he creates Hellblasters and Infernus squads, so GW can sell more product. This is spin. And on the Traitor side, the Chaos Space Marines are all haggard and scrappy. They are veterans of the Long War. They've fought the Legion Wars in the Eye of Terror. They scavenge for weapons and armor, and their resources are depleted. Don't you see? All of their tubes are corroded, and their bolt guns have wooden repair jobs. The Chaos Space Marines just don't have enough plasma guns to go around to fit an entire squad. Spin. Now to be honest, I am amenable in part to GW's spin. There are loads of stories that depict the Traitors as being scrappy, but if we're going to force characterization in this way, if one of these Space Marine factions are going to be more evocative of the legions of old, I prefer it to be the faction which still identifies themselves as legions. But ultimately, it all comes down to preference, and it speaks to a greater point, one I discussed on a previous Grimdark Therapy podcast with Northern Exile and Outer Circle. The crux of it, Warhammer is at its best when you have a bevy of options. The larger the box you have to make choices within, the more room you have for not just thematic choices, but also player expression. I would consider this a kind of key virtue in a hobby which is as laborious as Warhammer. Because when you shrink that box and limit the choices players have, GW is asking you not to build your army, but to build theirs. This one went on a bit longer than anticipated, but real quick, as per usual, I've configured a custom datasheet for a Chaos Space Marines special weapon team. Pretty standard stuff relating to the usual special weapon options of the Traitors. As for the obligatory 10th edition standard unit ability, I gave them one called Target Purge. If they make a Dark Pact, +1 AP on crit wounds and lethal hits when they shoot. What do you think? Both on the ability and point side. Let me know in the comments. Well, that's it for this one. If you enjoyed this video, there are buttons for liking, sharing, and subscribing. Thanks for watching, and a special thanks to Julius Maximus, as well as my other generous patrons and channel members. Channel members and patrons get early access to regular channel videos, as well as free access to various STL doodads. Just a little something for those who help keep the dream alive. Anyways, thanks again for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.